they started to question that what they were doing in terms of information processing and computational practices. They found themselves in this, I'll quote you, in this liminal space between the two fields, which caused them to question whether what they were doing was architectural at all, or something in opposition to it, or something new altogether. At times they characterized themselves as anti-architecture and anti-architects, which is very interesting. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we're so happy to hear this kind of embrace of architecture as a kind of strategy for software and for digital work, but then to have architects be in that space looking back, feeling like, are we traitors or are we lost?
Well, it worked different ways for the different people in the book. I think that for Christopher Alexander, he was interested in destabilizing the expert genius know-it-all architect, because a lot of what his work ended up being about was showing the architecture of the everyday and putting people in a frame of mind where they could make architectural decisions on their own. So in that sense, he hated the idea of the genius architect. And he, throughout all of his work, he rails against novel form, novel representation. It's just absolutely not what he's interested in. And it should be said that he is hated by many architects, in part because the moralizing and the screeds in his work are not a lot of fun to read. If you devote your life to making beautiful buildings, you think, what does this man have to do with me? So that's what Alexander's up to. For Cedric Price, he had letterhead that said Cedric Price, #1 anti-architect. And he in some ways was very, very architectural. He taught at the Architectural Association throughout his life. Everybody knew him. I think everybody liked him. He was great, wicked fun. But he destabilized what architecture was supposed to be. And that's what I love so much about him. Sometimes I think of those days in the early web and even today with the kinds of land grabs about what we must be and what we should be and what, usability is more important than anything. Architecture is more important than anything. I like the fact that he's, if you asked Cedric Price, he might say, well, do you even need a website? As he said, technology is the answer, but what was the question? So I like that he's able to do that. Richard Saul Wurman popularized the notion of information architecture starting in 1976. He didn't coin the term. That goes to Peter McCullough at Xerox in 1970. But he popularizes the term, and he was an architect, trained award-winningly well, medal award-winning architecture student at Penn, worked in Lou Kahn's practice for 13 years, had his own practice for, I think, about 13 years. And then I think that he would still call himself an architect. I don't think that he would disavow that, but that his architecture takes place in the form of understanding and promoting understanding. So I think that he would say that, I wouldn't dare put words in his mouth, but but I think that he'd say that he's in the business of understanding, and I'd say that his architecture takes place on the page and takes place in events and in different kinds of convergence, modes of convergence, and I think he understands that really quite well. Nicholas Negroponte found what he was doing to be sometimes anti-architecture. This is something he's written about, at least in his earlier phases. But also I think that his architectural training and his experiences in an architectural studio gave him insight into how people think visually and tactually, and what it means to learn and study in that environment. He started doing, he took Stephen Kunz's mechanical engineering drawing class, I think his freshman year of college, and he finished his bachelor's of architecture, went straight on to his master's of architecture, and when Stephen Kunz took a leave of absence, 5 days later after graduating with his MArch, Negroponte stepped in and started teaching for him, and he has been officially affiliated with MIT ever since. So yeah, pushing the boundaries of technology made him not architectural, but being within a technological framework made him architectural.